Sure. Here's a rewritten version of your scene with a tighter cinematic narrative flow, more immersive pacing, and natural tension. While preserving all the key moments and facts, Marco Rubio thought it would be just another panel. Controlled talking points. Live broadcast? Sure, but nothing he hadn't done 100 times. Until Jasmine Crockett pulled out her notes. She didn't raise her voice, didn't cut him off. She just waited. It was a policy discussion, Middle East strategy, sanctions, national security, the usual script. For guests, one moderator, beige walls, cold lights, a ticking studio clock in Arlington, Virginia, Rubio started confidently. His tone was polished, the kind that plays well with viewers half listening over dinner. What we're seeing in Iran is a result of weak leadership, he said. Sanctions relaxed, deterrence lost, Americans in danger again. The moderator, Diane Kerr, nodded automatically. She'd heard this before. So had Jasmine Crockett. But she didn't flinch. Then soft. Steady she spoke. Senator, she said. Are you referring to the strike in Erbil last month? Rubio hesitated. Among others, she leaned in just slightly. That's interesting, because 2 weeks ago the Department of Defense clarified that the group behind that strike isn't backed by Iran's military. It's a rogue militia one that actually operates against Iran's interests. Rubio blinked. She wasn't done. You also mentioned drone activity, she added. The last confirmed Iranian-backed drone strike on U.S. forces was 8 months ago. The Pentagon issued an update just last Thursday, correcting previous claims. Then she pulled out a printout, highlighted, footnoted, date-stamped. She didn't wave it. She placed it on the desk between them like evidence in a courtroom. Rubio opened his mouth, closed it. On screen, the moment was quiet. In the studio, it was still. Senator, she said evenly. If you're going to accuse this administration of emboldening Iran, you should at least bring current intel. This isn't 2021. That line stuck. Not loud, not angry. It's true. Rubio gave a tight smile. We all interpret intelligence differently. I'm not interpreting, she replied. I'm reading. You can verify it. It's public. Then, turning slightly to Diane, I came prepared because people back home want answers grounded in reality, not recycled talking points. The camera paused on her face. Calm, composed, certain, not a viral moment by accident. She had come for this, and Rubio, still flipping through his papers, wasn't looking for his facts anymore. He was looking for a way out. 3 nights earlier, long after the Capitol emptied, Jasmine Crockett's office lights still glowed. Not the overheads, just her desk lamp and the blue hue of her monitor. Papers were everywhere. Transcripts, Tintel briefings, highlighters, a half-drunk water bottle. Her chief of staff, Lionel Burke, leaned on the doorway. You're not going to sleep, are you? I can't, she said, eyes locked on her screen. Rubio's going to lie. I need to be louder than his confidence with facts. He stepped forward, dropped a folder on her desk. That's from Mariamet State. Unclassified embassy data. Updated last week.
That's
Graphs. Activity logs. One page stopped her cold breakdown of militia attacks by affiliation. Iran-backed assaults had dropped significantly since February. She underlined it. Got him, she whispered. Lionel smirked. He's going to say the administration is soft. We've emboldened Tehran. Buzzwords, which he'll probably cite. An old drone strike and call it fresh? You sure you want to do this live? Absolutely, she said, closing the file. Because if I don't, his falsehoods become narrative, and that narrative gets played until it becomes truth. Lionel raised a brow. You dropping his voting record too? She nodded. That's my ace. Most people don't know he voted against the bill to protect us diplomats. If he wants to talk security, we'll talk his record. She grabbed her yellow legal pad, not for a script, just bullet points, anchors she didn't want. To sound rehearsed. She wanted to sound ready. Over the next 2 days, she called a military advisor in San Diego, a RAND analyst, a former CIA liaison. She wasn't collecting slogans, she was collecting receipts. By the night before the panel, she had 3 folders. Sanctions, misinformation, Rubio's record. She rehearsed with Lionel twice in her living room. On the second run, she stopped herself. No, that sounds angry. I don't want to sound angry. You want to sound like you've had enough. Exactly. The morning of the broadcast, she rose at 5. Went for a run, cold shower, no breakfast. I want to feel sharp, she told herself, by the time she reached the Arlington studio. Everything was in place. Her notes. Her folders. Her calm. Rubio was already seated, smiling that easy on-camera smile. Barely looked at her, but she was watching, not with malice. With intent, he didn't know she had one. More card. Already printed. It's already ready in, burning a hole in her folder. The show had been live for barely 10 minutes when Rubio leaned into the camera. This administration has lost its grip on deterrence, he said. What we're seeing in the Middle East is calculated aggression encouraged by weakness. Iran senses we won't act. His tone was precise, rehearsed. He listed 2 incidents, a checkpoint bombing in Iraq and a drone strike near a U.S. base in Syria. He called them Iranian-coordinated. Then accused the administration of responding with reduced sanctions and diplomacy. He turned toward Jasmine, not quite looking at her. It's just enough to imply. Your turn. He didn't know she'd memorized those incidents. Didn't know she'd already spoken with the analysts who authored the internal memos he was misquoting. She didn't glance at her notes. She looked straight at him. Senator, she said, those 2 attacks you listed, according to CENTCOM, neither was directed or funded by Iran. Rubio shifted. She continued. The Iraqi bombing was carried out by an unaffiliated Shia militia one that opposes Tehran's current regime. And the logistics convoy in Syria that occurred near Kurdish-held territory, also not under Iranian control. She paused. That's in the March 18th DoD update. Did your team miss it? Silence. Rubio fumbled. We've received different assessments from where? She asked, polite but direct. He hesitated. Regional partners. Jasmine nodded once. So not from U.S. intelligence. Another silence. Tighter. He turned to Diane, searching for an off-ramp. But Crockett leaned in. Senator, this isn't a debate about perception. It's about facts. And if you're not bringing current data to the table, what are you bringing? Room didn't explode. It contracted tight with tension. Thick with truth. Rubio didn't answer. And Jasmine Crockett didn't need him to, because she had already won. Absolutely. Here's a rewritten version of your scene, keeping all the original impact, emotional tension, in factual weight, but making the language even tighter, more cinematic, more fluid for a dramatic or journalistic delivery. I don't mind disagreement, Crockett said, her voice calm. But the American people deserve accurate information, especially when we're talking about sending troops, funding allies, and risking lives. Diane tried to step in. Let's. But Crockett didn't raise her voice. She just kept going. Clear, unshaken. You've been on every network the past 2 weeks, Senator, pushing this idea that weakened sanctions are fueling violence. But you keep leaving something out. Those sanctions haven't changed since last year. And attacks on U.S. personnel have actually decreased over the last 3 months. She reached into her folder, slid a page across the table knot for the cameras. For him, here's the DoD's monthly incident report. Numbers, locations, attribution, it's all there. You can take it home. Rubio let out a breathy laugh, but it fell flat. You seem very prepared. I am, she said, without hesitation. Because lives are on the line. And I don't have the luxury of throwing out old intel and hoping no one checks. The studio didn't erupt. No dramatic soundtrack. But back in living rooms, viewers sat up straighter, started listening. Because this wasn't just a fact check, it was a setup. And Rubio was already in it. Diane Kerr moved to change the subject pivot. 2 regional alliances, maybe? But Crockett leaned in, eyes steady. If I may, she said. Diane gave a small nod. Crockett turned back to Rubio, not with fire, but with precision. There's something else we need to talk about, she said. Not just intel. Accountability. Rubio shifted in his seat. Hands went to his notes, then to the glass of water, then back again. was all motion. No grounding. Crockett opened a second folder and slid forward another document. This is the House resolution from Matha 1 to strengthen diplomatic protection protocols in the Middle East. Satellite upgrades, emergency extractions, security. Infrastructure, you remember it. He said nothing. You voted against it, she said flatly, along with 4 others. That resolution would have improved protection for over 900 Americans Baghdad, Tel Aviv, and elsewhere. Rubio straightened. There were provisions I couldn't support. You mean the transparency clause she cut in, still measured? Quarterly audits on private contractors? Not a poison pill, Senator. Just oversight. You're misrepresenting? No, I'm documenting. She handed over another page, like evidence in court. You can't call yourself a national security hawk while voting down the tools to keep Americans safe. That's the gap I want people to see. He opened his mouth. She didn't wait. You had the same intelligence we all had. And instead of reinforcing embassy security, you blocked it. Then you came on this panel to blame the administration for the results. Now the air in the studio felt colder. Even Diane stayed silent. Crockett wasn't shouting. She didn't need to. Her tone was steady, relentless, like she had memorized every word. Politics is about priorities, Rubio offered. My vote reflected concern over misuse of funds. She cut in again. The same bill had bipartisan oversight. If that was your concern, propose an amendment? You didn't. You just said no. Rubio sat still, calculating, eyes narrowing. Not in anger and damage control. Crockett turned toward the camera now. Every time someone uses fear to mislead the public about foreign threats, we edge closer to another pointless intervention. Every time a leader skips the details to sound tough, people die. It wasn't dramatic, it was sober. It hit like a stone. No shouting, just receipts, handed out like flyers. Behind the scenes, the control room buzzed. Was this too raw? Was it going off script? But the numbers didn't. Live viewership was spiking. Rubio's fingers tapped the desk. Crockett sat back, folders closed, breath steady. We have a responsibility to be honest, she said. Because when lives are on the line, the truth isn't optional. It's non-negotiable. Diane finally found her voice.
As we're going
to pause for a commercial break, no one moved. The screen faded to black, but the audience didn't. And the reaction, already flooding every feed. When the show returned, the usual sweeping camera angle tried to restore normalcy. Theme music, bright lights, Diane's smooth reset. But something had changed. Rubio sat straighter now, arms crossed tight over his. Notes, his posture stiff, guarded. Crockett, by contrast, looked like she'd just started. Relaxed shoulders, even breath. Ready, let's pivot to regional diplomacy, Diane tried. And how the U.S. works with strategic partners to ensure mutual safety. Rubio seized the lifeline. That's why leadership is so important right now, he said. Our partners Israel, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, they're watching. They want consistency. Strength. Crockett turned to him again. Calm, you mean? Like consistently funding diplomatic safety initiatives? He ignored it. Our enemies don't respect delay. If we signal weakness, we invite confrontation. Jasmine nodded once. Let's talk about signals then. Gon shifted in her chair. She knew that tone. Crockett continued. Back in April, the Foreign Relations Committee proposed funding to update surveillance in 3 high-risk consulates. You were briefed on the threat assessment, Senator, same as the rest of us. Rubio didn't answer. The clause passed through committee. Near unanimous support. But when it hit the Senate, Floor U voted it down. He opened his mouth. She kept going. Not just voted it down. You went on record saying it was financially bloated and symbolic. But then, 1 month later, an outdated security system failed in Manama. 2 guards injured. She paused. You called that bill symbolic. They call it a breach. Rubio tried to deflect. It bundled unrelated programs. The language was rushed. You could have revised it, she said instantly. But you didn't. You killed it. Then you blamed the White House. That's not leadership. That's optics. Congresswoman Diane interrupted. What exactly are you suggesting? I'm saying, Crockett replied, locking eyes with Rubio. When it comes to national security, words are easy. Votes are harder. And too many leaders perform concern on camera, only to disappear when the real work shows up. Rubio paused too long before responding. I respect the Congresswoman's passion, he said, but passion doesn't always equal policy. She didn't blink, and vague metaphors don't erase voting records. Diane tried to steer things back, but it was too late. The moment had already landed. This wasn't a shouting match. This was the sound of someone showing up prepared. Someone who read the fine print and held others to it. Rubio glanced off camera for just a second. A reflex. A flicker. Crockett noticed. He was used to safer panels. Softer questions. Familiar rooms. But accountability had arrived, and it had receipts. She leaned forward again, this time with a different kind of weight. You've served in the Senate long enough to know what fear-based rhetoric can do. You've seen the cost. So when you say we're inviting confrontation, I have to ask, are you talking about Iran, or are you talking about the truth? No applause, no gasp. Just silence dense, electric. It didn't need volume, it needed replay. And that's exactly what it was about to get. Across every phone, every screen, every headline, something had shifted, and it wasn't shifting back. Here's a polished cinematic rewrite of your scene, keeping the tone sharp. Observational and tension-rich while tightening the flow, enhancing rhythm, and amplifying the stakes with understated intensity. His fingers tapped the edge of the table again. Left, right, left. A steady rhythm betraying nerves. Crockett didn't speak during the segment. She didn't need to. She stayed perfectly still, as steady, hands resting lightly on the folder in front of her. Occasionally, she glanced toward Diane, never toward Rubio. Not once. In the control room, the producers kept cutting to Rubio's face. Not intentionally, it just happened. Instinctively, he was no longer the centerpiece. The camera was chasing his reaction. His confidence had dimmed. Responses came slower now, like he was filtering each word through 5 layers of internal review. The crisp, confident delivery he was known for had faded into something more cautious or careful. Too careful. When Diane looped back with a question on escalation in the Strait of Hormuz, Rubio cleared his throat. Well, it's a complicated scenario, obviously, he said. While I appreciate the Congresswoman's perspective, I think she's making assumptions about motivations that are difficult to prove from this side of the world. Jasmine finally looked at him. No, she said, calm as ever. I'm not assuming. I'm reading declassified briefings and comparing them to confirmed activity on the ground. You're the one making assumptions based on incomplete or outdated intel. Rubio blinked, caught off balance. That's not entirely accurate. You're right, she said, not missing a beat. It's not entirely, it's completely. That one landed. Not loud, not flashy, just surgical. Diane exhaled slowly through her nose, trying to steer things back to neutral ground. Keep it focused on policy, please. Jasmine nodded once respectfully, and went quiet again. But the moment was already sealed. Rubio took another sip of water. Then another. Back in offices across the hill, staffers glued to the live feed started texting each other. Fast and aid too. A Republican senator from Florida typed out what others were already thinking. Someone should have prepped him better. She's killing him. On Twitter, the clip of Crockett calling out his vote on embassy funding was already passed. 400,000 views under 15 minutes. Someone had slowed it down, added subtitles, and overlaid it with security cam footage of the Manama breach. TikTok moved even faster. A creator named @FaxandFury posted a mashup, Rubio stammering on one side, Crockett calmly flipping through, her notes on the other. The caption, "Who's the symbolic one now?" Even conservative forums weren't aligned. Some defended Rubio, calling the moment unfair or over-rehearsed, but others asked harder questions. Why didn't he deny it? Did he really vote against that bill? Where's his proof? Back in the studio, Diane shifted into commercial mode, her voice tighter now, like she was managing a small fire no one warned her about. We'll be back after the break, she said, with final thoughts from our panel on the road ahead in U.S. diplomacy. As the camera zoomed out, the panelists began removing their mice. Rubio leaned back in his chair, collar damp with sweat. He motioned to the producer for a towel. One was handed over silently. Crockett didn't move. She unhooked her mic with calm, deliberate ease and collected her folders. From backstage, Lionel caught her eye. "You're golden," he mouthed. She allowed herself a small smile. No words. Rubio looked over, finally, and spoke in a low voice. "Didn't think we were going to get personal tonight." Jasmine met his gaze. Didn't blink. "It's not personal." "Senator, it's public," and she was right. This wasn't staying in the studio. It was already bouncing through every feed screen. In group chat, in the country landing hardest with the voters who'd been told. For too long, to accept half the story. By the time the show ended, Jasmine Crockett was trending not just in political circles, but on feeds filled with people who didn't even usually watch policy panels. #Crockett clarity, #Rubio exposed, #receipts matter, the hashtags multiplied by the minute. The clip of her sliding declassified reports across the table hit 1 million views in under an hour. Someone added a cinematic score and timed the crescendo to Rubio's silence. That version blew up on TikTok. Creators stitched reactions, one said. "No, this is how you shut someone down without raising your voice." Another, in front of a whiteboard, broke down the exact bill Crockett referenced. Here's what Rubio voted against. No spin, just facts. Even Instagram was buzzing. Political pages that normally stayed out of cable news shared screenshots of Crockett mid-sentence, captioned, "We need more of this energy in D.C." Meanwhile, in Rubio's camp, the silence was deafening. No tweets, no statements, no clarifications. Nothing inside. His Senate office, staffers scrambled. One aide suggested drafting a Twitter thread explaining the vote. Another floated a short video response. Rubio shut it down. "We don't want to keep this alive," he muttered. But it was alive. Clips aired on morning shows across networks. Good Day Tacoma ran a segment titled Crockett versus Rubio, who had the facts, one older veteran called in. "I don't care what side you're on," that lady showed up. The gut punch came later. Liberty Grounded, a conservative podcast known for defending Republican hardliners, opened with an unexpected take. "I don't usually agree with Jasmine Crockett," the host said. "But last night, she ate his lunch." His co-host added, "You vote against protecting Americans abroad and then call the funding symbolic? That's a miss." Rubio's aides watched that clip in silence. Even his base had questions. Constituents in Florida began emailing, some polite, others ... not. Crockett's team barely slept by midnight. Their inbox had over 4,000 messages. Half were from media outlets requesting interviews. The rest were from supporters' military families, students, diplomats thanking her. One email simply read, "Thank you for not letting him rewrite the truth." Another, "That moment gave me hope again." At 2 a.m., Lionel texted Jasmine. A meme, her face next to a gavel, with the caption, "She brought the court to the table." She didn't reply. She was asleep. By morning, her office released a short, composed statement. Congresswoman Crockett appreciates the opportunity to clarify facts on national television. She believes public service should be rooted in truth, not theater, and looks forward to continued conversations based on accountability. No drama. Just clarity. Rubio's team, meanwhile, still hadn't agreed on a response. By midday, they finally posted a dry, deflective tweet. "Last night's discussion proved how complex our global challenges are. Disagreements are healthy. Let's focus on solutions, not sound bites." But it didn't stick. One reply nailed the mood. "She had folders. You had vibes." Talk radio hosts spent more time analyzing his discomfort than defending his case. As for Crockett, she appeared on Morning Current. Composed, steady, no gloating. "It's not about Senator Rubio," she said. "It's about how easily facts get lost in political theater if you can't come prepared with the truth." Maybe you shouldn't be the one speaking for the country. It had started as a sharp exchange, but now it was something more. People weren't just watching the moment, they were watching the aftermath, and the cracks were beginning to show. The next morning, before the Capitol steps saw sunlight, Jasmine Crockett was already up, coffee in hand, hair tied back, scrolling through her phone at her kitchen table. Not for vanity. For temperature, she saw her name trending again. Viral edits. Supportive DMS, quiet messages from colleagues. You did what a lot of us wish we had the nerve to do. She didn't smile. She took a slow sip of coffee. Let the pressure settle back in, because yesterday wasn't the peak. It was just the first rumble of a much bigger storm. Here's a refined, cinematic rewrite of your passage. The tone remains resolute and focused, with smoother pacing, sharper emotional cues, and stronger transitions to elevate the tension and clarity without sacrificing the underlying power of the original. She sighed. I don't want this to turn into a meme war. It already has, Lionel said, setting the folder on the table. But it's turning into something more, too. He flipped it open. Inside were early polling snapshots, informal but telling. Voter sentiment around Rubio had dipped slightly, especially among independents. Meanwhile, Crockett's favorability, with swing voters, was climbing. More surprisingly, military families and veterans groups were circulating clips of her panel performance. The focus wasn't just on the moment, it was on the message. Her handling of the embassy funding vote was being held up as a textbook example of leadership rooted in facts, not theater. This wasn't a takedown, Lionel said. It was policy clarity, delivered live, clean, no yelling. People are starved for that. Jasmine leaned back, thoughtful. I just want to keep it about the work, she said. I don't want to become a media story. I want the policy to stay in. Focus. She paused. What's his office doing? Lionel glanced at his phone, scrambling. Their press secretary tried to land him a Sunday interview, got denied. This morning they leaked a memo saying he was unfairly ambushed. Jasmine blinked. Ambushed. It was scheduled. We all got the same briefing packet. I know, Lionel said. But they're trying to frame you as overly aggressive, rehearsed, like he got blindsided. She let that sit a moment. Translation. They're losing control of the story. And they were. Down in Rubio's Senate office, the mood was heavy. Doors closed, phones buzzing with nothing good. His comms director, Kendra Groves, stood by the window holding a stack of reaction briefings. Most weren't flattering. Look, she said, we can't pretend the panel didn't happen. People saw it. They're still seeing it. If we try to pivot, it looks like we're dodging. Rubio sat at his desk, eyes locked on a photo of himself. With Israeli leaders from a decade ago, what do you suggest? Don't deny, she said. Clarify. Talk about your long record on national security. Say it was a disagreement on language, not principle. He didn't respond. She softened. Or, we say nothing. Hope it fades. Rubio finally looked up. She made me look unprepared. You were, Kendra said, then caught herself. I mean, you didn't expect her to show up with declassified briefings. That's on us. He rubbed his temples. We need something to shift the narrative. But the narrative was already shifting, and not in their favor. Crockett's office had been flooded with calls. Veterans organizations were asking for briefings. A Gold Star family in Missouri invited her to speak at an upcoming security conference. Op-eds were already in the works, titled things like, When Preparation Beats Performance. Still, Jasmine kept her eyes on the work. Set up a roundtable next week with embassy personnel, she told Lionel. Off camera, no media. I want to hear from them directly. He raised an eyebrow. Not exactly headline material, good, she said. I'm not chasing headlines. I'm chasing truth. Meanwhile, Rubio's team was stuck trying to patch the night before. And time wasn't on their side. By week's end, something in the air on Capitol Hill had shifted. On the surface, everything looked the same, suits, polite nods, but the undertone had changed. Conversations were more careful. Staffers more reserved. Crockett's name started showing up in briefings. Unrelated to her district, people were paying attention. some behind closed doors. Called her lucky, said Rubio had an off night. But most knew better. What she did wasn't luck. It was a well-prepared moment arriving exactly on time, across the country. The story took on a life of its own. In Jacksonville, Florida, the town hall turned heated when a group of retired military officers brought up Rubio's embassy vote. One stood holding a printed transcript of the panel. "This is what accountability looks like," he said. "He had a chance to protect us." He walked away. In Albuquerque, a high school civics teacher played a clip for her students. Not the fireworks, just the moment Crockett said, "If we can't agree on basic facts, we're just feeding the chaos." She asked what that meant. A student in the back raised his hand. "It means truth has to come first even when it's uncomfortable." Even Rubio's base in Florida's 27th district was shaken. They weren't abandoning him, but they were asking questions. On local radio, a longtime supporter called in. "I like Rubio," he said, "but she made strong points." He didn't answer her. He dodged. The host hesitated. "Yeah, that's tough to come back from when someone walks you through it point by point." And Jasmine? She didn't gloat. Instead of morning shows, she went to Colorado Springs to meet with military spouses about base housing conditions. No cameras. Just listening. Taking notes. Afterward, one mother whispered to another, "She talks like someone who already knew this, not someone who just learned it." Back in D.C., Rubio's office tried to reframe. A newsletter went out. This week, Senator Rubio stood firm in a tough foreign policy discussion. While others grandstanded, he focused on strategy. Didn't stick. People remembered the sweat, the silence, the folder full of facts he never counted on. The Des Moines Herald ran a political cartoon, Rubio in a boxing ring, gloves up, standing calmly outside the ropes, holding a document titled Actual Facts. The caption, "She didn't swing, she cited." It made it all the way to staffers at the White House. But Jasmine. She stayed out of the spotlight. When a hallway reporter asked how it felt to become a political rising star, she just smiled. "I'm not interested in rising," she said. "I'm interested in clarity." She didn't name Rubio. She didn't need to. The point had already landed. It was never about humiliation. It was about refusing to let fiction wear the mask of fact, and people noticed. One email from a voter in Erie, Pennsylvania, said it best. "I don't care if I agree with you on every issue. What I saw this week was someone doing the job the right way, with facts, with respect, and with a spine. Thank you." It wasn't dramatic. It was honest. And that was the part Rubio's team couldn't spin. Behind the scenes, one question lingered. What will Crockett do next, stand? He'll be ready for it? 2 weeks later, the story faded from the headlines. The hashtags slowed. Media moved on to the next scandal, the next shiny distraction. But the people who saw that moment, they didn't forget in a VFW hall outside Cheyenne, Wyoming, veterans sat over coffee. They didn't talk about Crockett like a celebrity. They talked about her like someone who'd shown up, done the work. "She didn't grandstand," one man said, 2 tours under his belt. "She didn't gloat. She knew her stuff." That's what. I want a Senat performance. Readiness. Back in D.C., Jasmine didn't ride the wave. She sat at her desk drafting a new bipartisan resolution, quietly, methodically. This one. It called for mandatory real-time briefings for all foreign policy panel participants. A procedural fix. Nothing flashy. But it carried the same principle that guided her that night. If we can't debate from the same facts, we're not debating. At all, Lionel handed her the first draft. "It's not flashy," he said, "but it's the kind of thing that lasts." She looked up. "Good," she said. "I'm tired of flash." And that was the difference. The Crockett-Rubio moment wasn't remembered because it was loud. It was remembered because it wasn't. Because someone calmly, clearly, and relentlessly held another person to their own record without spin. Without insults. Without shortcuts. In a world obsessed with performance, that kind of clarity felt like oxygen for every young person wondering if their voice would be taken seriously. For every voter tired of being spun. For every woman who's had to enter a room knowing she'd be underestimated until she opened her mouth. That moment mattered. It sent a message. Come ready. Know your stuff. Don't flinch when the room gets quiet. Let truth do the work. And as Jasmine Crockett walked out of that studio 2 weeks earlier past the phones, the producers and the whispers behind hallway doors, she didn't slow down. She just adjusted the strap on her bag, glanced at Lionel, and said, "What's next?" She wasn't chasing a moment. She was chasing truth. And the next time someone tries to bend it, she'll be ready.